Has this ever happened to you? When a woman grows tired not just in her body but in her soul. When she realizes she is no longer chasing someone to love her, no longer bending herself into shapes to be chosen, no longer performing the quiet, invisible rituals of proving her worth. Something ancient begins to awaken inside her. The energy that once ran outward, desperate to be seen, to be held, to be wanted, turns inward, back toward its true origin. And in that turning, everything begins to change. In Jungian terms, this is the first whisper of individuation, the soul's natural movement toward wholeness. For years, she may have lived under the spell of an inner complex, the belief that love must be earned, that value is something reflected back from the eyes of another. She may have mistaken attention for affection, and affection for validation. Her animus, the inner masculine archetype that represents reason, purpose, and will, might have been projected outward onto men who seemed strong, confident, or mysterious. They became mirrors for what she had not yet owned within herself, but the mirrors always cracked. The dream always dissolved. Because projection cannot sustain itself indefinitely. It must return home. When a woman stops chasing love, she does not stop loving. Love is her nature, her breath, her essence. What stops is the illusion that she must seek completion outside of herself. The same energy that once chased becomes the very energy that builds. It becomes creativity, clarity, discernment. She begins to see how the world once fed on her need. How society films. Even the gentle whispers of romantic ideals told her she must be chosen to be whole. But Jung reminds us that the unlived life, the disowned self, never dies. It waits beneath the surface in the shadow. And when she stops running, she meets that shadow face to face. It is not soft. It is not comforting. It is full of anger, grief, forgotten power. She meets the part of herself that was silenced, the one who raged when she was ignored, the one who feared she would disappear without someone's gaze upon her. She learns that what she thought was love was often control disguised as care, or fear disguised as devotion. And as she sees it all, something remarkable happens. The shadow no longer terrifies her. It begins to guide her. It becomes an inner compass pointing her toward authenticity. She remembers the words of the Stoics, that peace is found not in what happens to us, but in how we respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." And so what once felt like heartbreak becomes initiation. The wound is no longer an enemy, it becomes a teacher. The same ache that once drove her to chase now drives her to create boundaries, to seek solitude, to build an inner world that no longer collapses when someone leaves. There is something profoundly magnetic about a woman who no longer seeks validation. She doesn't reject love, she simply no longer kneels before it. Her worth is no longer in question, and because of that she becomes paradoxically more desired. But now desire no longer controls her. She can stand before admiration and not lose herself. She can face rejection and remain whole, because she has touched the part of herself that cannot be taken. In Jung's language, she begins the integration of her animus, no longer projected outward, but embodied within. Her actions become deliberate, her thoughts sharp, her direction firm. The feminine within her does not disappear. It deepens, becomes receptive, wise, anchored. She learns that true love is not pursuit but presence, not performance but participation. The dance between the masculine and feminine within her becomes balanced, sacred, creative. What was once a restless ache becomes stillness. What was once fear becomes freedom. This woman begins to live not for romance but for meaning. She no longer asks, "Will someone choose me?" Instead she asks, "What am I choosing to create with my life?" Her gaze turns inward, and there she discovers the kingdom she had been searching for all along. But this transformation does not come without loss. The old patterns resist. The ego, once sustained by the drama of longing and the illusion of control, trembles as it dissolves. It will whisper, "You're too cold now. You'll be alone forever. You're losing your softness." Yet beneath that fear, something ancient smiles. Because she has not become cold, she has become clear. And clarity is not the absence of feeling. It is the mastery of it. The woman who stops chasing love begins to embody a quiet power that few can name. People sense it when she enters a room. Not loud, not performative, but undeniably present. She carries herself as if she belongs everywhere and nowhere at once. She no longer competes, compares, or begs to be understood. She knows now that peace is not found in being loved by others, but in loving herself enough to stop needing to be needed. And that is when she becomes unstoppable. There is a subtle shift that happens when a woman no longer orbits around the gravitational pull of romantic validation. It is not dramatic and it does not happen overnight. It unfolds quietly, like dawn breaking through a long night. At first she may not even recognize it. She just feels tired. Not physically, but soul-weary. The endless cycles of trying, waiting, hoping begin to feel hollow. The patterns that once gave her identity now feel like chains. And so, almost imperceptibly, she stops. She stops chasing. She stops negotiating her worth. She lets silence replace strategy. And in that silence, she meets herself for the first time. Jung would call this the meeting of the self, the archetype of totality, the deepest center of the psyche that has always been waiting to emerge. When a woman stops pursuing love, she no longer feeds the false gods of external approval. Instead, she turns toward the sacred temple within. It is there that she realizes something essential. She has been projecting her own divine qualities onto others. Every man she ever loved deeply, every heart she ever chased, was in some way a mirror of her own unlived potential. She had been seeing her strength in their confidence, her wisdom in their mystery, her tenderness in their fleeting affection. They were not her completion, they were her reflection. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And so, when she stops chasing, fate itself begins to change. The unconscious scripts, the ones that told her she was incomplete, unchosen, or undeserving, begin to lose their power. She no longer acts them out. She observes them. She begins to understand the story beneath the story, the psychological architecture of her own longing. This is where the journey turns inward, into the deep forest of the soul. There she finds not just beauty but chaos, all the parts of herself she disowned in her pursuit of love. The anger she was told was too much. The ambition she learned to hide to be more likable. The intuition she dismissed as irrational. All these fragments wait in the dark, whispering, "Welcome home." It is no longer about love in the romantic sense. It becomes love as wholeness, love as awareness. She starts to nurture her inner world the way she once nurtured others. She honors her rest, her intuition, her voice. She creates not to be seen, but because creation itself is a sacred act. She learns that what she was chasing in others was not affection. It was the lost dialogue with her own soul. The Stoics remind us that freedom is not the absence of attachment, but the mastery of it. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." The bravery here is not in rejecting love, but in facing the emptiness that follows when you stop defining yourself through it. That emptiness is sacred. It is the space where the self begins to emerge. And yet this transformation often confuses those who once knew her. Some will say she's changed. Some will accuse her of being detached or hard. But in truth, she has simply stopped performing the archetype of the good woman, the one who sacrifices herself for harmony, who carries others' emotional burdens, who believes that to be loved she must be less. She no longer plays that role, and in doing so she threatens the unconscious patterns around her. People sense that her energy is no longer available for their projections, and it unsettles them. But she does not explain herself anymore. She no longer rushes to correct others' misunderstandings or soften their discomfort. She realizes that silence is not distance, it is dignity. In that stillness she begins to hear a different voice, one that is not born from fear or need. It is quiet, steady, ancient. It tells her, "You were never meant to be small. You were never meant to chase what is already yours, and what is hers cannot be taken." It is the inner sovereignty that comes from self-knowledge. It is the quiet confidence of a woman who understands that love, like light, radiates outward only when it first burns within. In Jung's mythic language, she begins to embody the archetype of the self-realized feminine. Not the maiden who waits, not the lover who chases, but the queen who creates. She becomes the axis around which her world turns, not through domination, but through balance. Her outer life becomes a reflection of her inner order. Relationships shift, careers evolve. Her sense of purpose deepens. She becomes less reactive, more intuitive. She no longer seeks intensity to feel alive. She has found aliveness in stillness. The unstoppable part of her is not a warrior's aggression. It is presence itself. It is the serene certainty that comes from knowing who she is and who she is not. There comes a time when the world begins to respond differently to her. People notice something, a certain quiet power and unshakable calm. It's not arrogance. It's not withdrawal. It's the kind of presence that makes noise fall away. She doesn't need to explain herself anymore because her energy speaks first. She's become what Jung might call individuated, a human being whose inner and outer worlds are finally in dialogue. When she walks into a room now, she doesn't wonder who might notice her. She observes. She reads the room with an intuitive precision that once eluded her because she was too busy seeking approval. Now her perception is her ally. Her sensitivity, once her greatest vulnerability, has transformed into discernment. She no longer mistakes chemistry for connection or intensity for intimacy. The men she once found magnetic now seem transparent, not because they changed, but because her perception did. Her unconscious projections have dissolved. The veil has lifted, and yet this clarity comes with a strange melancholy. When illusions die, they leave silence behind. She begins to see the world as it is, not as she wished it to be. This is the Jungian night sea journey, when the soul passes through darkness not as punishment, but as purification. The ego mourns the loss of fantasy, while the deeper self whispers, "This is what freedom feels like." Freedom is not glamorous at first. It's raw, it's quiet. It's the long pause between who she was and who she's becoming. Sometimes it feels like nothing is happening, but underneath everything is changing. Jung called this process the alchemy of transformation, when the base metal of suffering is turned into gold through consciousness. What once broke her now refines her. What once defined her now dissolves into wisdom. She begins to notice the subtle difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the hunger for external validation. Solitude is the sanctuary of the soul. In solitude, she meets her own company and finds it exquisite. She reads, she walks, she creates. She learns to listen not just to her thoughts, but to what lies beneath them. She begins to understand that her worth is not a negotiation. It is a constant. The Stoics, too, spoke of this kind of peace. Epictetus taught that freedom comes when we no longer depend on what we cannot control. She sees now how much of her life had been controlled by longing, for love, for recognition, for certainty. But the moment she releases her grip, everything she truly needs begins to flow toward her. Not because she demands it, but because her energy no longer repels it through fear. There's a paradox here. When a woman stops chasing love, love begins to find her in new forms. It comes through art, through friendship, through the quiet joy of being alive. She starts to see love not as possession, but as expression. Something she gives freely because it no longer depletes her. Her heart opens again, but this time with boundaries that honor her soul. She knows now that saying no is an act of love, the kind that protects the sacred space of her becoming. This transformation also softens her. Not into submission, but into compassion. She no longer resents those who once hurt her. She sees their wounds for what they were, unconscious shadows acting out their pain. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Every heartbreak, every rejection, every moment of chasing was a reaction that transformed her. It was never wasted. In time she begins to sense her purpose again. But now it's not born of proving anything. It emerges naturally, like water finding its path. She no longer seeks to impress. She seeks to express. The difference is everything. Her work, her voice, her relationships, all of it begins to align with her inner truth. People often mistake this peace for detachment, but it's the opposite. It's the fullness of being present without needing to control the outcome. She can love deeply now because she no longer fears loss. She can give because she no longer needs to be given to. She has become what Jung described as whole, not perfect. And so the unstoppable part of her is not that she cannot be hurt. She can. But pain no longer defines her. Her strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It's the refusal to abandon herself in the face of it. She has discovered the art of self-return, and that is a kind of magic the world cannot take away. There is a point in every woman's awakening when she realizes she no longer wants to be understood. She wants to be true. This is the quiet revolution that follows her withdrawal from the chase. For so long her energy moved outward, trying to be chosen, to be seen, to be understood. But now the axis has turned inward. She no longer lives to fit into someone else's story. She writes her own. This turning inward is not selfishness. It is psychological integration. Jung wrote that individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. Wholeness requires meeting the opposites within oneself. light and shadow, tenderness and ferocity, need and independence. When a woman stops chasing love, she stops splitting herself. She allows contradiction to exist without shame. She can be soft and strong, nurturing and assertive, loving and unattached. Her emotional life, once governed by reaction, becomes guided by reflection. She no longer asks, "Why did he leave?" but "What part of me sought something outside that I hadn't yet cultivated within?" This is not self-blame, it is self-awareness. It's the moment she understands that every love story was a mirror, and every heartbreak, a map. Slowly, the fear of being alone transforms into the serenity of belonging to herself. She learns that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of self. She begins to see her own patterns of emotional survival, the ways she adapted to avoid rejection, the masks she wore to feel safe. And when she takes off those masks, the woman beneath them breathes for the first time. The Stoics would call this the return to the self-governed life, a life where peace depends only on one's own inner state. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That realization is what now anchors her. She no longer clings to the tides of others' emotions. She becomes the shore. But this evolution does not erase her desire for love. It purifies it. Love no longer comes from emptiness but from fullness. She doesn't chase because she doesn't need to. Her heart is no longer a begging bowl. It's a vessel overflowing with its own light. From this place, love becomes devotion without dependency, giving without depletion, intimacy without loss of self. In Jungian terms, she has integrated the animus, her inner masculine principle of focus, structure, and sovereignty. This integration allows her to hold herself the way she once longed to be held. She no longer needs someone to make her feel safe, because she has built that safety within. She no longer yearns to be completed, because she has met her own other half. Her feminine no longer fears her masculine. They dance within her now, balanced, fluid, sacred. The animus gives her direction. The anima, her feminine essence, gives her intuition. Together they create the harmony that once seemed impossible. She becomes, as Jung said, a vessel for the union of opposites, the sacred marriage of the psyche. From this union comes creation. Many women, upon reaching this stage, begin to create art, businesses, movements, or communities. They pour into the world what they once poured into others. Their energy becomes generative, not performative. The love that once chased now builds, now heals, now transforms. The world may not understand her transformation. Some will say she's different, unreachable, too intense, too calm. But these judgments no longer move her. She understands that people often fear what they cannot possess, and they cannot possess what is free. Her freedom is not rebellion, it's alignment. It's the natural state of a woman who remembers her divinity. The unstoppable force she has become is not loud. It does not demand attention. It radiates from the quiet knowing that she has already won, not over others, but over her own illusions. Her beauty now is not in her appearance, but in her presence. Her value not in being chosen, but in choosing herself again and again. And in this self-choosing, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to mirror her wholeness. Opportunities align, relationships evolve, coincidences multiply. What once required effort now arrives effortlessly, because energy that is whole attracts from wholeness, not from need. Love may still come to her, but now it is a meeting of equals, not a rescue mission. It is soul-recognizing soul, not shadow-seeking refuge. It is no longer the love that consumes, but the love that liberates. She has become the embodiment of Jung's greatest insight. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now, she has. There comes a sacred calm when a woman finally stops seeking what was never lost. The pursuit ends, and in its place rises a radiant quiet, the kind that does not crave, does not chase, does not demand. It simply is. This is not resignation, but realization. The long, painful pilgrimage toward love outside herself has brought her home. And home, she discovers, was never a person. It was presence. In this new state, she lives differently. Time slows down. The small things, sunlight spilling across her floor, the sound of her own laughter, the stillness before dawn, become enough. Her nervous system, once ruled by anticipation and anxiety, begins to rest. She no longer waits for a message, a gesture, a sign. She no longer negotiates her peace through someone else's attention. The constant hypervigilance that once defined her, the anxious scanning for signs of rejection, dissolves into still awareness. She can finally breathe, and in that breath, life itself changes its rhythm. Jung wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But this is exactly what she has done. She has made peace with the parts that once frightened her, the needy one, the jealous one, the hopeful one, the one who longed to be seen. She no longer tries to silence them. She holds them. She understands that love was never about banishing her imperfections, but about bringing them into light. From this wholeness, compassion flows effortlessly. She can look at the version of herself who once begged, waited, and chased, and smile. Not in judgment, but in gratitude. Because without that woman, this one would not exist. The pain, the patterns, the heartbreak, they were not detours. They were initiation rites into the mystery of her own becoming. The Stoics, too, would see this as victory, not the loud external kind, but the inner triumph of self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius taught that a man's true delight is to do the things he was made for. Now she understands that she was not made to pursue, to please, to perform. She was made to be, to create, to expand, to love without losing herself. Love for her now is no longer a goal. It is a frequency. It is how she moves through the world. She no longer asks, "Who will love me?" She asks, "How can I love more fully, without fear, without possession, without performance?" Her love has become devotional, not directional. It is not aimed, it radiates. In Jungian terms, she has reached the symbolic union of anima and animus, the sacred marriage within. Her inner masculine provides groundedness and purpose. Her inner feminine offers intuition and receptivity. Together, they create what Jung called the self, the totality of the psyche. It is the stage of individuation where opposites reconcile, where the unconscious and conscious no longer battle, but dance. The world senses this integration, though it may not have language for it. Some will be drawn to her, magnetized by her stillness. Others may retreat, unsettled by her autonomy. But she no longer measures her worth by others' comfort. She knows that freedom can be intimidating to those still imprisoned by their own projections, so she blesses them and continues walking. Her path is no longer one of persuasion, but of presence, and with each step her energy becomes unstoppable, not because she resists, but because she flows. Like water, she no longer argues with form, she becomes it. Obstacles turn into pathways, endings into beginnings. What used to feel like rejection now feels like redirection. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. She begins to teach without teaching. Simply by existing in truth, she becomes an archetype, the woman who has returned to herself. Others see her and begin to question their own chasing, their own compromises. She doesn't preach, she embodies. And embodiment is the highest form of wisdom. There is nothing left to prove. She knows that everything she sought through love, belonging, peace, joy, validation, was never meant to come from another. It was meant to come through her. That is the secret Jung and the mystics have always pointed to. The divine is not outside of us. It is expressed through our becoming conscious of it. And so she lives now in quiet radiance, neither grasping nor retreating, neither craving nor controlling. Her love has no agenda, no fear of loss. She loves because she is love. When a woman stops chasing love, she becomes unstoppable, not because she has hardened, but because she has softened into truth. She moves through the world with the kind of grace that only those who have known both longing and liberation can embody. Her presence itself becomes a form of healing, her peace a form of power. And this is the essence of individuation, the soul's final awakening. To no longer run from yourself, to no longer seek what you already are, to remember that love was never something to find, it was something to remember. She is not waiting anymore, she is not chasing anymore, she has arrived. Thank you for spending this time with us. Your journey gives life to this channel. Stay with us, and together we'll keep exploring, growing, and discovering the truths that shape the soul. Until the next video, take care and see you soon.